Mr. Yeo, thank you for taking time off your busy schedule to share your thoughts with us here at the World City Summit. The World City Summit is a homegrown event that sort of showcases Singapore's urban solutions. We aspire to be an urban provider of urban solutions. How relevant do you think Singapore's experience is for countries around the world? What we've learned and what we've experienced in the past 50 years?
Well, in some ways, Singapore as a city-state gives a glimpse into the future of many places in the world. We are now in a very interesting phase where finally knowledge is percolating to the last corner of the earth. And probably the biggest historical phenomenon taking place today is urbanization on a massive scale. The whole world will be urbanized in this century. We see in China, it's happening in India, and all patterns are giving way to new patterns because of technologies which are now available with IT, with modern transportation of high-speed rail. You're able to create a pattern of urbanization quite different from the past, one in which we are not overly detached from nature, from the countryside. It's almost as if now we can colonize nature in a sensitive, harmonious way. And because Singapore has done this for a long time, this being the only piece of real estate that we have, what we do here is of considerable interest to many people who are just starting. So for some time now, we've been a model of intensive study for municipal leaders in China, in Southeast Asia, in India, in the Middle East, now also in Africa, to the surprise of many Singaporeans. But that's to be expected. You can't protect as intellectual property many of the experiences that you've acquired. So people come, they look, they study, they say, no, this is a good idea, that's a mistake, I can do better on that one. And we are seeing now intense competition among municipal leaders worldwide, each learning from the experiences of others, each determined to overtake, because in the end, a city grows by attracting talent and money. And if you can do that, you will surge ahead, get into a positive feedback loop, and then become dominant in a particular space. So Singapore has a particular advantage, which was once a disadvantage, in that we're also a country, which means that around the city, we can almost erect a semi-permeable membrane, allowing in nutrients which we need, but keeping out pathogens, keeping out the toxins which we do not want. Other cities, which are part of larger polities, can't do that. So the result is, the more you succeed, the more you attract the masses from around. And city leaders have sometimes an impossible task keeping up the surge of people streaming in. But Singapore has that advantage. But of course, being small has other penalties, but we can talk about that.
You mentioned about cities are in competition, but also cities need to learn from one another, and that's how they are able to, see what went wrong and improve it, or look at some other thing and see whether they can replicate it. What value do you see in events such as the World City Summit as a forum where there's mutual learning that takes place? Do you see value in this sort of events?
Oh, absolutely. It becomes a marketplace of ideas. If we don't learn from others, others will overtake us, and our ignorance will condemn us. So it's very important that even while we've achieved certain successes, we'll be very humble and say, look, let's see how others do it. And maybe they've got better ideas. And indeed, if you go to China, if you go to India, if you go to other places, from time to time, you come across new ideas which we've never thought about, which are interesting, some of which we should also adopt. So this becomes a place where we can learn from one another, and in the process, show off Singapore, because we've got certain accomplishments, And we have become a hub for all kinds of urban services. And people come here to learn big ideas, to learn small ideas, to buy products, to buy services, to sell us products and services. In the process, all of us will be enriched.
You mentioned China and India, and you've also in your travel widely in your work in the past. Can you speculate on the shape of cities, shape of Asian cities as opposed to Western cities? How do you think these two regions the cities in these regions will grow and will develop?
The cities in Europe took a leap forward with the Industrial Revolution. In the last century, the major developments in urban progress were in the US. And it was rationalization taken to an extreme degree. So you have grid patterns. This is First Street, Second Avenue, East, North, Southwest. And this gives American cities a convenience and an ease of understanding, which you don't find in European cities, which grew from old towns, old concentrations organically, higgledy-piggledy. For the cities of the 21st century, I think we have to look at China. Because after over a century of revolution, properties have finally been re-aggregated in the hands of the collective. So now, with a central will, you can create a putong, you can build high-speed rail, you can straighten out highways, tunnels, create university cities, and so on. So I think China will be very interesting in terms of urban experimentation on a massive scale. Singapore, because of our own history, was able to completely recreate the cityscape through the URA. And Lee Kuan Yew very early moved to amend the laws, concentrating a lot of powers in the state. And this enabled us to almost redesign the city, but while keeping some older elements. I mean, one argue that we should have kept more, but we have not done too badly. So because of this, we became of great interest to the Chinese. Yeah. And what we do here, if it's a good idea, they multiply it by a factor of 5 or 10. But that's China. It's become a little boring, however, that the cities are beginning to look alike. It's always一个鹤星 and then 一个one circular row, one San Huang and so on. And it's almost Taoist in their conception of urban development. First you plant a pole, and then let the pole radiate. When it grows to sufficient size, you plant a new pole. It's almost philosophically a polar opposite of the Western Cartesian way of looking
but
at
it's also
things.
similar in the way that it's a pattern that is done repeated. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's also replicated.
Yeah, it's replicated. That's what I mean. Yeah.
If you are in a continental country, say in the US in the 19th, 20th century, you begin, say you have Sears, you have McDonald's, 7-Eleven. Once you have a model, it works, you replicate across the whole continent. So you expand very fast. In a city state, you create a model for this city state, it cannot be easily replicated outside the city state. So we don't enjoy the advantage of what Arnold Toynbee called mimesis. You see. But if you adapt, then you say, okay, I make an adaptation, like CapitaLand in China, it can replicate in China. And so too, we're trying to find a formula for India. So with adaptation, this Singapore DNA can replicate. And those who are able to find the formula, they will succeed. Those who are unable to, their success will be confined to Singapore alone. And as for bigger countries, they sometimes have the weakness of their strength in that you succeed in China, you succeed in the US, and you're so big, you have no need to move beyond. And one day you find that, I'm at a disadvantage because I'm so specialized, so evolved for that particular environment. But you move out of that environment, you are not adapted. So I would say in this age, there's no point reinventing the wheel, but you need different kinds of wheels for different roles. So those who are alert to adaptations, who know what are the important ideas already existing, make use of them, adapt them in a new environment, and then succeed in replicating, they will do very well.
How would you avoid the homogenization of the urban landscape? Because people have spoken about the Coca-Colonization of the world. If you walk down, any major shopping street in China, the same brands are there, same shops, same everything. So there's a homogeneity even within, among all the cities. That there is, what is this identity that you spoke about earlier that needs to be the differentiation?
No, to some extent it's already happening. If you travel, sometimes you don't know which airport you're in, because they're all the same shops, the same products, the same fast foods. And you say, oh, where am I? They all look identical now. So the world, to that extent, has become a little boring. Will it become flat?
As Thomas Friedman suggests.
I don't think it would, because human society is complex, human culture is enduring. There are millions of lines of code in each and every one of us, transmitted by culture, many of which we are not even conscious of, but which affect our behavior, our pattern of interactions, our sense of aesthetics. So if you move from city to city, the characters change. Even within China, yes, Han culture is dominant, but within Han culture, there are regional cultures. The differences are not as great as you move from country to country in Europe.
You were talking about Han China, and the differences between China is not as much as the differences between European countries. Yeah? But China is fairly homogeneous because it's 99% Han Chinese, and so that dominant culture really does obliterate a lot more of the other cultures. But I think we may be running out of time. So do you have something to wrap up, Mr. Yeo?
Well, if continuing on that conversation, if you're Southern Chinese, you'll find Northern China and Inland China quite different from South China. Yeah. So even within similarity, there are differences. And increasingly, we operate on subtleties. And cities which are able to manage these subtleties and give to the visitor, to the resident, an experience which is special and which is quintessentially human, beyond what is functional, to what is deeper, maybe even spiritual. I think those will have a great advantage. So the softer side of architecture, of city planning, will become increasingly important.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.